and most Americans probably today could not find Ukraine on the map. Why should Americans care about Ukraine? It's far away. It has nothing to do with us. We have our problems. We have economy. We're just finishing 2 wars. People are shooting each other. Who cares? So this is the first question. Who can answer this question? Do you know? Do you have an answer? Why is it on the news all the time? Why should we care about Ukraine? Those of you who are Americans.
The balance of power.
What? The balance of power. Okay. Meaning what? After Cold War finished, we felt that there was no need for balance of power, right? Remember, Mr. Obama said, we're going to have a reset with Russia. In fact, remember, he said to Medvedev when he was running for office, he says, just give me some time, I will have much more freedom. Vladimir and I will do some business together, right? Remember? There was no competition with Russia. So what is Ukraine all about? What does it represent to us in America? Yes, sir?
Well, it seems to me that if Putin succeeds in dismembering the Ukraine, that could give him reinforcement to enter other countries.
Okay.
And who knows where that will end.
Okay, I think this is basically it. Basically, Putin's aggression is striking at the fundamental structure of the world. The world order is suddenly shaking. We thought that basically the 21st century, we know where the map is. We know where the countries finish, where the next country. Now suddenly he just takes over a big chunk of Ukraine, another country, and basically nothing happened, right? Crimea, do you think Crimea will ever go back to Ukraine? Does anybody here think that it will go? Where is the condemnation of the Security Council? Where is the United Nations? Where is the world screaming and saying, stop it? Life goes on. In fact, if you read the papers yesterday, Merkel, after coming back from Washington, apparently was attacked. Major companies in Germany basically said to her, hey, you're friendly with Obama? Shut up. We don't want any additional boycotts or sanctions. And we're talking about Siemens, we're talking about Volkswagen, Deutsche Bank, Adidas. All these companies are saying, we're doing good business. We cannot afford, you know what, it's not about business. Let them do whatever they're doing. So basically, we're talking about a very interesting situation that suddenly one guy, one bully, is going to just destroy, remap Europe. And I think if you can think about what Chinese are doing right now, they're watching very carefully. What the Iranians are doing, they're watching very carefully. What North Koreans are doing, they're watching and they're saying, gee, if he can get away with us, and by the way, they also already saw what's happening with Syria. I mean, they're murdering, he murders his own people, and we spoke about the red line many times, right? Anybody hears about Syria anymore? They're murdering innocent people every day. Nobody's talking about this. We have other issues. The plane disappeared. Now we're talking about, who knows, the horrible situation in Africa, of course, where the 370 girls now disappeared, something like that. So horrible things are happening all over the world. But in my opinion, what's happening in Ukraine right now may be the most important issue for the next, who knows. By the way, I want you to know, we have elections here, so we have no idea who is going to be the president in 2.5 years, right? Do you know that this is his 3rd term as a president, right? Do you know that according to a Russian constitution, he can legally continue to be a president until 2024? How many presidents will have changed by that time? And who knows? He may make a deal with Medvedev or somebody else and continue for another 20 years. So he has a long-term vision. He does not need to respond to the opposition. He destroyed opposition. There is no opposition anymore. So Putin has a plan, and that's the question really. Why is he doing what he's doing? Putin does not forget. He has a grudge. He cannot forgive the West for beating them, for destroying Soviet Union, for winning the Cold War. And so he, as you know, gave a major speech where he said that the most horrible catastrophe of the 20th century was the destruction of the Soviet Union. He thinks it's the worst thing. We said, wonderful, right? This is it, freedom, liberation, all these nations can become liberated and so on. He thinks it was a horrible event, and he's going to undo it as much as he can. Does he want to recreate the Soviet Union with 15 different republics? I personally don't think so. Most experts say that that's not what he wants. You know why? What do you think? Why not? Why doesn't he just go and take over Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Moldova, Belarus? What?
He can't afford it.
He can't afford it. It's basically we're talking about economic basket cases, one after another one. Moldova is what we say in Hebrew, alapanim, but Moldova is not the only one. Ukraine is collapsing. The economy, it does not exist basically. Thank God, 2 days ago, the European Union finally gave them a promise of $17 billion, which is another interesting story. All of this happened because of what? How did this crisis start? Do you remember? Anybody remembers? What happened? What? Yanukovych. What happened?
He broke his promise to the IMF.
Okay, wait, it happened in November. Yanukovych approached Europe and said, all right, I am willing to sign some kind of agreement with you, but I am in deep trouble. Financially, economically, this economy is terrible. We made a lot of mistakes, corruption. I need a few $1 billion. Help me. And the European Union said, get out of here. We're struggling. We have recession. So guess what? He went to Putin. And Putin said, welcome. That was the revolution. That's where the people went into the streets. It's called Maidan. You hear this word all the time. That was a protest. Basically, people horrified by the leadership. One president is richer than the other one. I don't know if you saw on the internet. We can go and check out how he lived, this Yanukovych, the one who ran away. I mean, golden pieces in every bathroom and so on and so forth. Basically, a bunch of thieves, one after another one. And that blonde woman that everybody's talking about, you remember who I'm talking about? Timoshenko. Have you seen this? With a blonde, she's apparently one of the wealthiest people in the world. By the way, they think, somebody just published, I think in Forbes magazine, that Putin may be richer, he's wealthier than Bill Gates. That's what they think. So nobody knows really, of course, precisely. Anyway, so Putin wants to reestablish Russian empire as much as he can. He wants basically Russian influence, he wants respect, and the most incredible thing is that he's the most popular leader in the world right now. Over 80% of Russian people think that he's a great president. 80%. 4 out of 5 Russians love him. Why? What has he done? He gave us pride. The world respects Russia. Now, do you respect Russia more? Who respects Russia? But it's the Russian mentality. After the Soviet Union collapsed, it was horrible. I've been going there every few years. I go there. Our parents are buried there. So, I think it's important to know what's happening there. And I remember going there right after it fell apart. It was horrible. It was like Wild West. I remember I was writing a dissertation once in Moscow, so I rented an apartment and I went to the archives of the Communist Party of the USSR to get some documentation. I wanted to prove that standing up to the big bear is what destroyed the Soviet Union. Anyway, I remember I opened a paper once, and every day there was horrible stories in the papers. And I read 3, 4, 5 papers. It was fascinating. So I read a paper. Listen to this. A guy opened an Italian restaurant that became very successful. So somebody said, you know what? I guess Italian restaurant is a good business. He opens an Italian restaurant 7 blocks away. The second night, he was shot at the doorways of his apartment. And they found out that he basically was hired. The shooter was hired by the owner of the first restaurant, you know. So I remember I was sitting with a bunch of young people, and they were found that this is just the beginning of the new Russia. And they sat around the table. I remember we were having vodka, and somebody said to me, you know, is it true that in America, I read that in America you can have McDonald's on one corner and Burger King across the street, and Kentucky Fried Chicken across the street. Is it true? And I said, yeah, you see this everywhere. And they said, but why? Why don't they kill each other? and I, to be honest with you, I did not have an answer. I said, from what I understand, it's actually good for business. They said, that's ridiculous. That's American naivete. The Americans are crazy. Just get rid of your competition, and that's it. In those days, you could kill a person for $420. They would fly somebody. You know, people would fly from all these little countries and so on. So the Russian, especially the older crowd, they lost the pride. Where is great Russia? We were superpower and we're nothing now. And suddenly he is bringing back. The whole world is listening. The whole world is watching what's happening there. So suddenly he's very popular. Now, is he going to be popular if the sanctions continue? Is he going to be popular if the economy really collapses? I spoke to some Russian friends of mine who said, up to a point, Russian people can suffer a lot, except if suddenly vodka disappears and bread disappears, there will be a revolution in the streets. Then they will, which brings us probably to the end of my presentation. What should we do? I do believe that America could do and should do something. Because in my opinion, Europeans are not going to do anything. Europeans are very weak. Europeans are selfish. Europeans worry about their 5 weeks vacation in the French Riviera. And basically, if America doesn't do it, nobody's going to stop. You know, when Obama stands up and says, we should not be the policemen of the world, I just asked a simple question. Okay, and who should be the policeman of the world? If there is no policeman in the world, ask the policewoman. What? Oh, the United Nations. Right? The United Nations should be the policeman. Let's ask our police person here, what happens if suddenly the mayor tomorrow morning stands up and says, Los Angelinos, you know what? I want to give a vacation for 3 days to the entire LAPD. We're all friends. We all live in the same city. We're all neighbors. Let's be neighborly. What will happen in the next 3 days in Los Angeles? You tell me. Riots, chaos. People will kill each other. So who comes up with this idea that we do not need a policeman, or that we should not be the policeman? Well, if America is not the policeman, who should be? So guess what? Putin is now the policeman of the world. And you know what? Forbes magazine now, third time in a row, says that he's the most powerful man in the world. From what? From what? It's a third world country. Most Russians still live in 19th century. The moment you leave Moscow, half an hour outside, there's no running water. But he's the most powerful man in the world, because he's the only one who's willing to stand up. Yes, any questions? Interrupt me, please.
So I thought it was the natural gas issue, right?
Okay.
The pipeline, there was a scenario where he threatened to cut it off, right?
Correct.
So, and he actually got $1 billion from us because we gave the Ukraine $1 billion credits towards some.
Yeah, we gave $1 billion. By the way, again, IMF gave them this week, gave them $17 billion.
The power that he has to be, I mean, what if he shuts off gas and
Okay.
can't get the gas?
Okay.
Is that riding in the streets in Europe?
This is a major issue. This is a major issue. Europe depends too much on his gas and his oil. For example, in Germany, 1/3 of natural gas comes from Russia. So they're taking a chance. Merkel will have to stand up and convince her nation, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to cut down a little bit on lights. Maybe we'll turn off the lights for 2 hours a night, whatever. That's not easy. No political leader is going to do this. It's very hard. So gas and oil is the only thing that he has. And that's why he's holding. He's basically saying, oh yeah, you want to play games with me? How about Holland? Holland, apparently 90% of gas they take from Russia. So it's a problem. Europeans depend on his oil and gas. Now we could hurt him if we had the guts. If we suddenly stand up and say, you know what? We'll take care of Europe. We can provide. There are other sources of oil and there are other sources of gas. Listen, in this country, apparently we have more oil now than Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Qatar and Oman and all those countries. If we just decide to, you know what, let them do it. And also this, what is it, Keystone? Keystone, I don't want to get into politics, but I think Keystone could solve a lot of issues. If Keystone suddenly would be approved tomorrow by White House, Russian economy would go down by another 30%. I mean, they would really be in trouble. So we have, yes, any comments, questions?
I wanted to repeat the question that was asked of the rabbi. Don't you agree, though, that Israel's position must be to remain neutral between Russia and Ukraine? Especially because, first of all, nobody thinks Putin is anti-Semitic.
Correct.
And Israel has so many Russian refugees, so many interests with Russia. It's the best relationship they've ever had. They can't choose sides, can they?
Okay, so this is a fascinating question. I'm glad that you asked him, because the fact is that Israelis is not, he keeps stressing about Aliyah. They have one, he didn't answer the question. Israel is playing a very, very subtle game. Putin, one thing, you can say many things about him, but one thing, nobody has ever accused him of being an anti-Semite. Putin went to Israel 2 summers ago. I was there in Netanya, and he dedicated a monument to the Soviet soldiers. He went to the Kotel, to the wall. He put on the yarmulke. Imagine. You know, I want to put it in perspective.
He grew up with a Jewish country.
I want you to understand something. What's the largest Muslims capital in Europe? Where are the more Muslims living in European capitals than any other? Is it Paris? London? Rome? Belgium? Moscow. Over 2 million Muslims in Moscow, and they are growing very fast. They're predicting that quarter of Moscow is going to be Muslim in another 10, 15 years. So think what Putin did. He goes to Jerusalem. He goes to the Kotel. He puts on yarmulke, and he prays at the Kotel. That's a statement. Imagine how Muslims in the Middle East and Russia were furious with him. So he's not an anti-Semite. And he's had good relations with Israel. So Israel cannot stand up against him. On the other hand, like this rabbi, he was telling you that everything is okay. Do you believe that? Think about the Jews stuck in... You're Ukrainian, so tell us, maybe you're...
No, I'm just curious. You said that, if I can redirect a little bit, you believe that the U.S. should play some kind of a role of global police. What kind of a role do you believe the U.S. should play and can afford to play in a country that, as you referenced earlier, really has no bearing on the United States?
You mean
whatsoever.
Ukraine?
Yep.
Okay, well, it is a different topic altogether. I think America is the only policeman in the world. America has played that role for the last, who knows, 3/4 of a century. And if America stops playing that role, the worst elements will come. We know when there is a vacuum, power vacuum, the worst tyrants will come to the surface. It's been proven. I mean, you name it. You take every situation. So America can play a major role. The last role we should play is lead from behind. I never understood that, lead from behind. Israeli soldiers, the first thing you learn is acharai. Acharai. Follow me. Follow me.
Do you think Putin is responding to the West, at least in the last couple of days, or do you think it's just a ploy?
It is interesting. I don't know if you follow what's going on, what's happening. Suddenly he took a stand yesterday. He stood up because, you know, first of all, tomorrow, watch what happens. Americans don't care about May 9. But May 9 is a very important holiday in the former Soviet Union. That's the Victory Day. So tomorrow, there will be a lot of tensions in the streets. There will be veterans of the World War II with medals, old men walking with women, with Soviet flags and stuff like this. And there will be Ukrainian nationalists on the other side who last year beat up these old people, and 2 people were killed and so on. So tomorrow that's interesting. He told us that they canceled all parades and so on. But we shall see. Maybe in this small town it's possible. But what will happen in the West? What will happen in Donetsk? What will happen in Kiev? So watch for that. But Putin is responding. Something happened yesterday that he stood up and he says, you know what? The referendum should not go. Let's postpone it. And he even mentioned elections for the president. So I don't know.
He's withdrawing troops from the border.
Yeah, that's he claimed. We have not seen the results. But basically, I don't know the details. Nobody really understands what happened yesterday. But just to give you the bigger picture, I believe that Putin without Ukraine is nobody. With Ukraine, he has an empire. This does not mean that he will occupy Ukraine. He does not need to occupy. He can keep paying a few gangsters and a few criminals to keep the tensions going. He will just stabilize the country for as long as necessary, and eventually there will be a president there who will be in his pocket. Like Belarus, for example. Belarus is totally in his pocket, and that's another major country in the north. And so I think that's what he needs to do. Now I want to talk about the Jews for a few minutes, because that was the topic, I think. Putin, Ukraine, and the Jews. Jews have a long history of anti-Semitism in Ukraine. Ukraine was one of the worst in World War II. I was there 2 years ago with a group from my congregation. And I remember we were walking on the main street of Kiev. Beautiful city, by the way. Classy, beautiful, nice city. And I said, I want you to understand we're walking into a major plaza now, and I want you to know whose monument you're going to see right now. And I suspect that most of you never heard the name of the main hero of the Ukrainian people. His name is Bogdan Khmelnytsky. This guy was basically a Hitler. 1648, he butchered babies, children, pregnant women, hundreds of thousands. We don't even know the numbers. He's considered the hero of the Ukrainian people. And as you come to the main plaza near Maidan, where they were demonstrating, his monument is there on a horse, and he's considered the leader, the nationalist leader. That's the beginning of the story. But there are many other stories. During Civil War, the Jews, as you know, the Pale of settlement was mainly in Ukraine. And Jews were killed by the whites, and they were killed by the reds. And there are many stories about this. There is a story, the chief rabbi of Kiev goes to visit Trotsky right after the revolution. And he makes an appointment. And you know Trotsky, Leon Trotsky, his real name was Bernstein. And so he says, Bronstein. So he says, Comrade Bronstein, please, do you understand what's going on down there? The whites are killing the Jews. The reds are killing the Jews. We're stuck in the middle. Please, you are in charge. You're the Minister of Defense, or Minister of War, he was called. Do something about this. And Trotsky says, Rabbi, my name is Leon Trotsky. What do I have to do with all of this? And the rabbi said, it's the Trotskys who start revolutions. And we, the Bronsteins, we pay for this. During the Holocaust, Babi Yar, one of the horrendous places, it's like Auschwitz, Majdanek, Babi Yar is up there. Do you know that most of the people who stood up there and shot children and innocent babies and women and men, it was not Germans. It was the Ukrainians who volunteered. The Germans were shocked how they basically did not need to do anything. My sister and I were driving just today, and we were talking about our mom, Zikrona Livracha, who lost 47 members of her entire family in one day. And she witnessed it. And almost every day, she would sit and tell, you know, there are two kinds of survivors. There are survivors who never talk, and there are survivors who cannot stop talking. I have in my congregation one woman, and if you say, good to see you, it's a nice day today. And she goes right away, she says, yeah, the sun was shining. And the commandant was standing right there. And my sister was right here. She cannot stop. She will whatever you say, nice shoes, she will tell you that she had no shoes and so on. So our mother, almost every day, could not stop talking. She would tell us how she witnessed the torture and the murder. And most of those people were killed by the Ukrainians. And this brings us to this whole breakdown, the west of Ukraine and the east. You hear this all the time, right? There are two Ukraines, basically. One is the pro-Russian, that's the east, that's the part where all of this is happening now. And the other one is in the west, right next to Poland and Czech Republic and Hungary and Romania and so on. These are two different mentalities. Most people here primarily speak Ukrainian. Most people here speak both languages, but a lot of them speak Russian. It is these people who want to be pro-Europe. They're the ones who don't like Putin. So you and I should vote for these guys, right? They're guys. They want to be next to us. They want to be part of the real world. And these are the pro-Russians. They like Putin. We should be against them. On the other hand, as Jews, do we want these guys to take over Ukraine? They're the ultra-nationalists. They're the fascists. They admire another big anti-Semite, Stepan Bandera, who's another murderer, who basically was just talking about machete. He was just going with a sable, just cutting women back and forth. So Jews are stuck. This rabbi is stuck. He cannot say, I'm scared, we're nervous about the Ukrainians, because who knows, there may be pogroms there tomorrow. On the other hand, he cannot really say anything against Putin, because the pro-Russians with masks, who know and don't wear any uniforms, they can come tomorrow in his town. So he, like Israelis, he is in the middle. He's trying to be neutral. Although there was a full-page ad 10 days ago in New York Times and a few other newspapers, many rabbis and the chairman of the Jewish community in Ukraine signed a paper, an ad saying, Putin is horrible and he is using us as pawns, which is true. Putin says that I need to protect people, Russian-speaking people, against fascists and neo-Nazis and anti-Semites. So Jews are used as pawns. He now can justify and say, you see, I'm protecting Jews. So it's a very, very difficult situation for the Jewish people. I think that he's right. When he said that he could not find a ticket, Sharansky announced 10 days or two weeks ago that Aliyah jumped by something like 60% in the last 3 months. Maybe not next month, maybe not 2 months. People don't just pick up and go. It will take 6 months, 9 months, but you will see this will be the largest Aliyah year from Ukraine that we have seen in many years. Yes, I see some hands. Let's open.
Just a question about your approach. I mean, I would love to say, you mentioned what's this like, lead from behind? You know, I mean, I guess one of the things that the world's complex, and we've been the policemen of the world for so many years that other countries just point their angst and anger, I guess, with social media and those other things. I mean, thinking about Egypt, right? You know, we think there's not always one good and one bad, right? You change one government, and who are the bad guys? Who are the people that are going to take over? Are they better or are they worse? Or Syria, is it the fundamental Islamic extremists who are going to end up taking over or not? And so sometimes helping them try to maybe leading from behind, I don't know if behind is the right word, but not...
I see what you're saying.
...in the middle where everybody, after Egypt, right, both sides were pointing fingers at us. Meanwhile, we're trying to help, you know, and putting resources, and everybody's pointing their fingers at us.
It's a very good question.
In the world, I think it's different. Maybe...
Let's keep the question short so we can get more...
So my question is a very basic one. I remember the very first speech that President Obama gave, foreign speech, was in Cairo. Do you remember that? That got a lot of publicity. He stood up there and he apologized, basically. He said, America is going to be different. We will not get involved in all the scandals, and we apologize. We made a lot of mistakes. Let me ask you a question. Is America respected more today than 10, 15, 20 years ago, or less? Less. We hurt every friend who loved us. We betrayed them. And all the enemies hate us even more. Do people in Egypt trust us? We betrayed them. Do people in Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia is quietly talking to Putin. Do you understand what we've done? Putin, this bully, this nobody, a KGB colonel, is walking around the world now, and everybody's running to have an appointment with him, to shake hands with him. We need to stop apologizing. America has a lot of problems, and I agree with you. I don't have simple answers. Syria is a big mess. I think that Syria today is too late. We should have gotten involved in the very beginning. We lost the boat. I don't know what will happen now. But definitely what we did is worse. We basically said, you know what? Putin, you're in charge now. And we walked away. So he's running the show now. I want to have other people to ask. Yeah, yes, sir. I'm sorry, ladies first. Go ahead.
No, I just was going to build on that real quick, and because you never answered my original question. question was, what kind of resources are the American people really prepared to commit for a country that, again, like really has no bearing on us? And to Howard's point, you know, like all of this involvement, you know, around the world really has gotten us a lot more in trouble. And it seems like, you know, sort of the steady pace of American isolationism is really coming, because I'm not sure that anybody here is really going to support committing resources, never mind military might, to anything where, again, to his point, is not really clear who is what side and who's really behind it.
Okay, but I think most Americans realize that if we just walk out and allow Putin to take over half of Europe, it's going to have bearings. I mean, believe me, it's going to, your gas, listen, I live in Florida. We pay basically half of what you're paying here. I got into the car last night. I was shocked. How do you not start revolution in this country, in this state? What's going on in Florida, in California? I used to live here. I mean, it's crazy. We pay half of what you're paying. So believe me, it's going to have bearing next month. We're going to your prices will go through. All of our lives will be changed. So we have to be careful. We cannot say, oh, it has nothing to do with us, but we can do a lot. Like even these sanctions. Everybody says that these sanctions don't bite. I'll give you a very basic, we have, I'm sure, financial experts here. The day that Mr. Obama stood up and announced new, more serious sanctions, do you know what happened to the stock market in Moscow? It jumped by 7%. You know why? What does it mean? They laughed at us. That's right. No credibility. They were laughing at us. It doesn't bite. So you took a few visas from a few of the oligarchs. Big deal. We could really freeze the entire economy. We could ruin the economy. If the dollar would, if the ruble would lose another 40%, and so on. Is that not answering your question? I'm not asking about soldiers, American soldiers, to be sent to Kiev. But there are many things. We're a superpower. We're still the most powerful country in the world. Why don't we call emergency meeting of the General or United Nations? Forget Generals, Security Council. They can veto. But the United Nations, 204 countries now. We should demand. They demand it every day whenever something happens in the West Bank. Why don't we stand up? Why doesn't our president turn to American people and convince you? This is what FDR did. When Americans were isolationists, they said, forget it, we have nothing to do with Hitler. Yeah. FDR stood up every day and he took the risk. And he said, no, I know it's going to hurt. But we've discovered, history has shown, if you don't do it when you can do it, if you wait, it will cost us much more, much more.
We didn't enter the war because FDR asked for it. We entered the war because we were attacked.
Yeah, that's true, but he was preparing America. By that time, America.
That's an important part of it.
So we should wait for Putin to attack America?
I just returned from Russia. I got back 2 weeks ago. It was part of a fellowship through the State Department for American Educators. And I came back really scrambled, and I'm sure you can appreciate that. When you talk to the Russians about what's happening, it's a very different scenario, and I agree with you, 80% approval rating. The Russians love Putin. We've never loved a president like the Russians love Putin. But their feeling when we sat down, and they weren't worried about the cameras in restaurants or whatever, when we sat at kitchen tables, was, we don't understand. We're going into Ukraine. We're saving Russians. We're helping Russians in Crimea, not on the eastern part of Ukraine, but in Crimea. This population is Russian. The second the Russians took over, the pensions of those people doubled.
He promised that it will double.
He did promise that it would double.
Has not changed yet. But I hear what you're saying. So number one,
more complicated.
I want to comment. You're right. You're bringing some very important points. Number one, the Russian people have no idea what's going on. He took over every station. There is no outside information. My sister is watching Channel 1. He is brainwashing them every day that we need to save them. Every survey, people say, in Kharkov, people were asked, just Pew Research last week said 14% of Russian speakers say, well, we want a little bit more autonomy from Kiev. But 72% say, we don't want to join Russia. We don't have any problems here. He made up an issue from nothing. But even let's say it's true. Let's follow the logic. What if Germany says, you know, we have German speakers in Hungary. They're in danger. We need to enter Hungary and we'll grab a piece of there. What about Romanians saying, you know what, we have Romanian speakers in Czech Republic, in Slovakia, Serbians. I was in Serbia, in Bosnia-Herzegovina 2 years ago, and I saw there is still hatred between Bosnians and Herzegovinas. This guy at the gas station, I say, this is exciting, I want another stamp. I'm actually in Bosnia, we hear about Bosnia. He says, sir, this is Herzegovina. And meanwhile he says, welcome to Bosnia-Herzegovina. They hate each other even now. He's probably resentful that Herzegovina is not first. He should not say Herzegovina and Bosnia. What I'm saying is, this is a very slippery slope. He wants to protect Russian speakers, and Afghanistan wants to speak Turkish speakers, and the Turks is going to protect the Sunnis over there. This is what's happening in the world. We're going to rewrite the maps all over. Let's just save each other. We cannot live like this. We thought that we have some kind of order. World order is shaken now because of this. I see hands though for a while.
Last question.
What is it in the U.S. national interest to want to go into Ukraine? I mean, I don't understand the direct U.S. national interest. I understand that there's a NATO interest, but I don't understand a direct U.S. interest.
Okay.
And therefore, what I think is happening is a lot of lip service that's being given in the public. Obama's not going to do anything.
Correct. So first of all, he should stop talking. I mean, I think it's terrible that we constantly speak. We say, don't you do this, and carry flies to Geneva and this and that. I think we should stop talking. We're not going to do anything. But basically, what I'm saying to you is, it is the most important issue of the 21st century. What's happening right now. It's going to affect every area of our lives. Because this is a bully he has a long-term plan. He's going to take Kazakhstan, which is oil and gold and you name it. He can take over Uzbekistan. He will take all over half of Europe, basically, because he knows that our response is kind of like childish. We threaten, we talk. I mean, we lost this whole battle because we didn't respond. I see that hand, this lady, speak up, because I know.
Save the world, and we're the ones who know the best what needs to be done. It is also a slippery slope, don't you think so?
Well, when Hitler came to power, didn't the people say the same thing? Didn't Chamberlain go and shake hands with Hitler and said it's none of our business, everything will be okay? When Czechoslovakia was taken by Hitler, the world said, oh, it's none of our business, it's far away, who cares about Czechoslovakia? And what happened? The more you postpone it, no, this is the slippery slope. You have to stand up to the bully. Every teenager knows. Ask this teenager, how do you stop a bully? If he asks for $1 every morning and you give him the $1, tomorrow he'll come and ask for $2. At some point you have to stand up and say, no, this cannot go. The international community has to get together. But the problem is we don't have friends anymore. Europeans don't respect us. Middle East is already all over the place and so on. I'm not saving Russia, I'm saying save us. It's going to come home. It's going to bite us. It's exactly the same like in every war.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to let this go into an argument.
What about good and evil?
I would say if you want...
Yeah, what about good and evil? Yeah, that's also a good argument.
What about good and evil? Why do you win against it?
I will leave you with two...
That's a good point. Did you hear the answer? Why do we always... Is it not fair to also bring in something except in addition to the selfish purposes? What about good and evil? When evil happens, the good have to stand up. Elie Wiesel.
We have a lot of good to take care of at home before we talk about policing other countries who are in gray areas.
Okay, so those of you who'd like to argue can argue all you want. I would say the following, and it hasn't been mentioned in the last 10 minutes. The people who will pay the big price if the world goes the way it's going are the Jewish people in Israel. We are the canaries in a tunnel. So when someone says to me, why should any country, whether it's America or anyone else, get involved in doing what's right to help, it's because eventually Jews suffer when despots take over. Point number two. You have standing in front of you the person, one of the few people in the world who's lived this life, escaped Russia, and came, and as I said, I was not going to formally introduce him, but I would say is probably one of the most knowledgeable and outspoken scholars on Jewish-Russian relationship and experiences. And the fact that he's speaking here is unique and not normal, because Leonid normally speaks in front of thousands of people at a time. This happened last February. I called Leonid and I said, hey, when are you coming to LA, as a joke? And he said, I'll be here May 8th. I said, well, you're speaking that night for us because we want to do a salon. So consider yourself very, very lucky.
I'm flying to China in 3 hours, and I want to say one thing to make it a little bit lighter, because, by the way, I appreciate your comments and questions, and I would love to stay behind and talk about this, because Paul is correct. The fact is, I didn't even bring up Iran.
That's right.
Iran also. America has stood up and said, we will not allow, they will never have, but the fact is, you and I know that it's poor, tiny Israel who's going to save the world once again, and it's not fair. Israel should not be the policeman of the world. But I want to conclude with a great line. I have never been to China. I'm leaving in a few hours.
By the way, there's no good Chinese restaurants there.
So that's the point. So everybody told me, especially if you keep kosher, basically I was once traveling around, and I basically suffered for 5 days. I ate hard-boiled eggs and boiled rice. They told me in my congregation, several people had just come back, and they said, even eggs are dangerous. Don't take anything. So I say, thank God for Shabbos. Because next Shabbos I will have a nice kosher, glad kosher Shabbos dinner in Shanghai with a Chabadnik rabbi, and that will be the only meal I will have for the next 2 weeks. So thank God for Shabbos, like you said in your movie here. Thank God for Shabbos. But you're lucky. Whatever Paul does, whether it's Shaare Zedek, whether it was JNF, whether it was we work together in Klal, what he does is also comes from the heart. He wants to educate Jews. He wants to create more passionate Jews. And I think that's what we did a little bit here. And I appreciate your comments. I know that this is a major issue in America today, and we will continue struggling with this. And we have to continue.
We want to thank the Schlesingers for hosting us tonight. Jennifer and her team for doing a great job organizing the evening. Lisa, thank you so much. We normally have gifts for our speakers, and they will get gifts. I'm not going to give anything to Lena because he's leaving for Israel. Enjoy the rest of the food, finish it up, and we have our next program the end of June, which will be around a pool party at Barak Aviv's house up in the Beverly Glen area. So enjoy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, you don't call it.
But also we need to learn from history. We have to learn what
We don't think it's a direct result of hiring being weak and the bosses.
Don't ask them. So.
Not need to make these.
Oh, Mishanichnas. And by the way, they also already saw what's happening with Syria. I mean, they're murdering him. He murders his own people, and we spoke about the red line many times, right? Anybody hears about Syria anymore? They're murdering innocent people every day. Nobody's talking about this. We have other issues. The plane disappeared. Now we're talking about, who knows, the horrible situation in Africa, of course, where the 370 girls now disappeared, something like this. So horrible things are happening all over the world. But in my opinion, what's happening in Ukraine right now may be the most important issue for the next, who knows. By the way, I want you to know, we have elections here, so we have no idea who is going to be the president in 2.5 years, right? Do you know that this is his third term as a president, right? Do you know that according to a Russian constitution, he can legally continue to us in America? Yes, sir.
Well, it seems to me that if Putin succeeds in dismembering the Ukraine, that could give him reinforcement to enter other countries.
Okay.
And who knows where that will end.
Okay, I think this is basically it. Basically, Putin's aggression is striking at the fundamental structure of the world. The world order is suddenly shaking. We thought that basically the 21st century, we know where the map is. We know where the countries finish, where the next country. Now suddenly he just takes over a big chunk of Ukraine, another country, and basically nothing happened, right? Crimea, do you think Crimea will ever go back to Ukraine? Does anybody here think that it will go? Where is the condemnation of the Security Council? Where is the United Nations? Where is the world screaming and saying, stop it? Life goes on. In fact, if you read the papers yesterday, Merkel, after coming back from Washington, apparently was attacked. Major companies in Germany basically said to her, hey, you're friendly with Obama? Shut up. We don't want any additional boycotts or sanctions. And we're talking about Siemens, we're talking about Volkswagen, Deutsche Bank, Adidas. All these companies are saying, we're doing good business. We cannot afford, you know what, it's none of our business. Let them do whatever they're doing. So basically, we're talking about a very interesting situation that suddenly one guy, one bully, is going to just destroy, remap Europe. And I think if you can think about what Chinese are doing right now, they're watching very carefully. What the Iranians are doing, they're watching very carefully. What North Koreans are doing, they're watching and they're saying, gee, if he can get along, and most Americans probably today could not find Ukraine on the map. Why should Americans care about Ukraine? It's far away. It has nothing to do with us. We have our problems. We have economy. We just are finishing 2 wars. People are shooting each other. Who cares? So this is the first question. Who can answer this question? Do you know? Do you have an answer? Why is it on the news all the time? Why should we care about Ukraine? Those of you who are Americans.
The balance of power.
What? The balance of power. Okay. Meaning what? After Cold War finished, we felt that there was no need for balance of power, right? Remember, Mr. Obama said, we're going to have a reset with Russia. In fact, remember, he said to Medvedev when he was running for office, he says, just give me some time, I will have much more freedom. Vladimir and I will do some business together, right? Remember? There was no competition with Russia. So what is Ukraine all about? What does it represent? Continue to be a president until 2024. How many presidents will have changed by that time? And who knows? He may make a deal with Medvedev or somebody else and continue for another 20 years. So he has a long-term vision. He does not need to respond to the opposition. He destroyed opposition. There is no opposition anymore. So Putin has a plan. And that's the question, really. Why is he doing what he's doing? Putin does not forget. He has a grudge. He cannot forgive the West for beating them, for destroying Soviet Union, for winning the Cold War. And so he, as you know, gave a major speech where he said that the most horrible catastrophe of the 20th century was the destruction of the Soviet Union. He thinks it's the worst thing. We said, wonderful, right? This is it, freedom, liberation, all these nations can become liberated and so on. He thinks that